Since that night, I haven't taken the shortcut home. It was a cold, damp fall night. There were no stars or moon out. It would have been pitch black if it hadn't been for the fog. It was about 10:30 Friday night as I walked home from my friend's house. The project we were working on took longer than we'd expected, so I took the shortcut home. It was down this tree-lined, bumpy old road without any streetlights or houses along the way. I usually liked taking the shortcut home, but I had only ever taken it in the day. At night, it seemed so much more menacing. Almost no one went down that road, pretty much just a handful of people who lived semi-near it, so I was surprised when, far off in the distance, behind me, I saw headlights slowly making their way down the old road. I remember still how the headlights illuminated the surrounding fog. It made the car look like something out of a dream, but not a good one. I pulled myself as far over as I could from the road in case the car couldn't see me through the fog, but my neon blue backpack must have given me away because as they grew closer, they began to slow to a crawl behind me. I could see the car now, a matte brown 90s coupe with tinted windows and pop-up headlights. I kept looking over my shoulder as they drew nearer until eventually they were beside me with maybe 5 feet clearance between us. I kept walking, trying to ignore them as the car moved alongside me. Then the passenger's window went down a few inches. I couldn't see who was inside, but an unfamiliar woman's voice sweetly asked, "Do you need a ride?" To which I kindly replied, "No, thank you." There was a pause as the car continued to move with me. Then the voice from the passenger's side asked with more strain, "Are you sure?" I replied, "Yes." To which she snapped, "Are you sure you don't want to ride?" I sternly replied, "Yes." I was glad to see the car speeding off after that, but my heart sank when I saw them pull up alongside the road about 100 feet ahead. I stood there for a moment, waiting to see what they would do, but they just sat there, their headlights still on and the engine still going. I decided to turn around and make my way back to the main, more populated route home. At that point, I hated myself for letting my cell phone die earlier in my walk, just looking at random shit. I was completely alone with these strangers out here now. As I hurriedly made my way back down the road, I heard gravel crunching off in the distance behind me. Before even looking back, I sprinted into the surrounding trees and hid, hoping the car would just leave when they didn't see me. I watched stripes of light shine through trees as the car neared. Soon it rolled to a stop. I heard 2 car doors slam. The engine was off now, but the headlights still illuminated the surrounding fog. 2 voices spoke to each other in hushed, aggressive tones for a moment, until a man's voice broke through the night. "You could get lost out here if you aren't careful. Why don't you just come out? We'll give you a ride home, nice and safe." But his friendly demeanor slowly slipped with my growing silence. "Look, there's nothing to be scared of. You're being unreasonable. Just come out so we can give you a ride. We'd never forgive ourselves if we left you out here and something happened to you. You're not making this easy for either of us. Come out now. Come out right now." Then the woman chimed in as the man angrily dug through the car. "Now you've done it. You've gone and pissed him off. You've really got what's coming to you, you know. This all could have been so easy. Maybe you wouldn't have even known what was happening until it was all over. Just drifting into a warm, comforting darkness. Either way you cut it, your time is up, you see." He knows these things. Whenever he sees one of you, he just knows. And he's right, because it always ends the same. The ones who listen, they look so peaceful in the end, but not you. No. I've seen the faces of those just like you two. Those who fight their fate, twisted, broken, and completely undignified. It's such a shame. I was so dizzy. I had to brace myself against the tree I was hiding behind, but I didn't have time to panic. I knew I needed to remain level-headed to make it out of there. I could hear them both making their way into the woods. They split directions. As I slowly and ever so slightly peeked around the tree I was leaning against, I could see the man, rope in hand, nearing a point which I would be visible. I began slowly making my way to a new hiding spot. I held my breath with each step. My only option was silence, but in the dark, you never really knew what your next step would uncover. Crunching leaves, a snapping twig. It was the worst gamble I could imagine at the time. No matter which direction I tried to evade him and he seemed to follow. I would take a sharp right, so would he. A loop, he was sure to follow. The woman seemed to have a terrible sense of where I was, but him, he just seemed to know. I would have thought he knew exactly where I was, and he was just doing this for the fun of it all if it wasn't for his seething eyes. It's strange how vividly I remember them to this day. You'd think in that mess of fog, mostly in the dark with only shards of light, his eyes would have been nothing but a wash of blurs, but no. Somehow I think I could draw every last vein cracked into those eyes. Soon on, I knew I'd have to ditch my backpack. It was so bright. I knew it would give me away sooner or later, but I did so reluctantly. I didn't have the luxury of time, light, or movement to go through the bag and make sure there weren't any items inside with my address on them for him to find me later. I just had to hope there weren't. In those woods, this all felt never-ending. No matter where I went, there he was. I felt like there was just no escaping him. We must have been out there for at least 2 hours when I began to believe what that woman had said. Maybe this was my fate. Maybe there was no way out. Even through my doubt, though, I never let my cover slip. I crept silently through the shadows as the man's fury began to boil over. I could tell no one else had ever given him this much trouble. I think that's part of what kept me going. Then I heard a noise I hadn't heard for hours. A low rumbling sound. A car. Shit. I was pretty far off from the road, and the car would be there any moment. I wouldn't make it if I crept as I had been. I needed to run. But could I outrun the man? I'd have to try. I could hear the man's weight hit the ground with force behind me. I could hear he was close, but I didn't dare look anywhere but straight ahead of me. I couldn't afford any mistakes. I could see headlights break through the east end of the road. I didn't have much time left. I was so close. So close. I hurled myself past the curtain of trees into the road. If the car didn't stop in time, at least my end would be of my own volition and not the man's. The car screeched to a halt, only inches to spare. I could see an elderly old man who lived maybe 4 houses down from mine in the driver's seat, very shaken. I ran to the passenger's door. It was unlocked. I ripped the door open, jumped inside, and yelled, "Drive!" The old man, who normally drove 10 miles below the speed limit, tore down the road faster than he'd probably ever driven in his life. As I looked back, I'd expected to see the man standing in the road behind a curtain of fog and dust, but the only trace of him was his car, still sitting on the side of the road, with its headlights on. When the police went back to search the area, the man, the woman, and the car were gone. They couldn't find any evidence to identify them. They couldn't even find my backpack. It's been a while since this happened, but it's never truly been over for me. I can't stop thinking about the promise they'd made me that night. my hand. Logically, I know the man and the woman were just mentally ill. There's no way they could actually predict the future, but since that night, I still can't shake the feeling I cheated fate.